So this video is getting to know you with Flynn Goward. Used to be my old pal, but now he's managing director. Flynn, right, we're going to just have a wander about and find out a bit more about you. So you're managing director of Star Sports. In the army, we'd have called that being a flyer. You've done exceptionally well, but well deserved. Where did your career start?
Within bookmaking?
No, your career. When you first started earning money, where did you do it?
I was a Saturday and Thursday night worker part-time at John Lewis Watford. I worked at John Lewis for 5 years, did a management scheme there, ended up in John Lewis Oxford Street, and then after doing that 5 years I met Ben, which is when I came over to Star as a senior trader originally. Did the head of on course for a bit, head of racing, did a more operational management role start of last year, and then got the MD gig back in April this year. So that's a very brief overview. Right,
going back to the beginning though, I mean, you're a very snappy dresser, but were you sort of attracted to the rag trade, or was it the management qualification side of it you were interested in?
Bit of both really. I didn't go to university, so I went straight out to work and carried on. It was that choice of going to university, trying to do something there, or do a management scheme at John Lewis, and decided to go for the management side of things. So I wasn't dead set on what I wanted to do at university. And then now it feels like the right decision because I am where I am. And look, I've always loved racing. I've always loved betting from when I was slightly younger than what I am now. So to end up where I am now, it was obviously the right decision at the time.
Yeah, so that's what I was going to ask you. I mean, as a young man, were you a gambler? Were you sort of going to the bookies? And when did your interest in horse racing start?
Probably from when I was around 12. So that would have been in about 2008. First kind of proper festival I remember was Cheltenham 2009. I think Go Native won the Supreme that year. My stepdad was massively into horse racing back then. I remember him having a decent amount of Courtauld Star regaining the Gold Cup. So from those ages, I didn't go into a lot of bookmakers or anything like that. It was more kind of online within that 2008-2009 time, and that's how my stepdad was obviously betting. So it was kind of that era is when I started getting into it. I was born in '96, so when I was around 12 probably.
So did your stepdad draw you into it initially?
Yeah. Like I say, it was around that time. I used to go to my grandparents' house on a Saturday, and we would go to St Albans Market. They would buy me the Racing Post. Then I would cut their garden for them, which would earn a bit of pocket money, and then me and my stepdad would come up with the selections for that afternoon, and between me and him and that pocket money we used to cobble a Yankee together. So that's how it all started really.
So when you were betting, I mean, did you were you going into the form? Were you looking at ratings? Did you get into it deeply, trying to make money, or was it just entertainment?
No, very much entertainment. When you're betting in very, very small sums, and also it's a nice thing to do with your old man, isn't it? So it was a bit of that. To be honest, early on I was a big listener of William Hill Racing. I used to email in quite a lot. Obviously Ross Briley on there at the time, Ken Peterson doing the paddock previews. So that's kind of how I got into it. God knows how I found William Hill Racing back then. But
William Hill Radio, you mean?
William Hill Radio, sorry. Yeah. So that's what really got me into the bug, really.
Right, so then you started delving deeper. So when did you stumble upon Ben, or did you seek him out? I mean, we know he likes to give people a leg up. So was that the reason you sort of went to him?
So I knew him, didn't know him, but knew of him from Channel 4 Racing. Obviously, reading out the big bets and stuff like that with John McCruick. So I knew of him, and then I think I followed him on Twitter. And you can see from his Twitter feed that he likes to give people a good chance, and especially young people. They'd just gone online at the time, so that would have been around 6 and a bit years ago. And I just sent him a DM on Twitter, and it kind of went from there really. To and fro, and didn't join for probably 6 to 9 months after when I first spoke to him, but he offered a couple of days work experience. First person I met from the firm was you, actually. You remember rightly?
I remember well, the dogs at Tanster.
Great Greyhound quarter final. I think Lofty describes it as losing a small GDP of a third world country or something on that night. So did their absolute cobblers. Then did a couple of days work experience at Epsom that year, and that kind of opened my eyes up to it, and I think I joined in the October of that year. But that's a brief story of how I met him anyway. Okay, so having experienced it all now, being the boss of the firm, do you think that if you'd been given work experience in the
in the office, you would have loved it so much, or was it the on-course thing that actually bit you?
Yeah, I think it still would have really interested me. I think what I really noticed the differences between the kind of corporate world of John Lewis, which is kind of over corporate, and then you come to the bookmaking sphere. You can actually be yourself. I was speaking to Ben about this the other day. When you're in the corporate world, you're moulding yourself to become what your superiors want you to be, in terms of the way you communicate, the way that you act, the way that you come across. Whereas when you're in the bookmaking world, or what I feel like, which is slightly less corporate, albeit becoming more so, you can harness what you're good at, and you can really be yourself, and you don't feel like you're moulding into somebody that you're actually not. So that's what I found very different. And my original point was going to be that being in the bookmaking sphere, I was around people that I could speak to. It's kind of a different language, bookmaking talk, and that's what I found when you work on course, when you're talking in different terminology and stuff like that. But whether that be in the office or be on course, there is that parallel of the type of language that's used in terms of bookmaking talk. So yeah, whether it was on course or in the office, I think I would have had the same result.
I mean, most people, well, going back in the ancient history of my day, when you started, you normally start with a fairly small bookie, or unless it was a family member, but you got chucked in the deep end. I mean, Star do things bigger and a lot differently than a lot of people. You know, what shocked you the most about the way they carry on?
Well, look, it was a very different firm when I first joined. So I joined about 5.5 years ago, and obviously they'd only been online for less than a year. So the reliance on kind of telebetting and kind of historic accounts was heavier back then to what it is now, whereas it's a bit more mass market, albeit we try and keep our identity of being on course, offering the best personal service there is, being able to talk to a trader live on chat very quickly, or phoning up to the office, which you can't get with a lot of the bigger boys. And look, we're not naive to think that we're a tier 1 bookmaker or even a tier 2. We're probably in that kind of tier 3 range now, but we weren't even in the conversation probably 6 years ago in terms of that space. But the game's ever changing, right? Regulations obviously hit, and you have to react to whatever the market conditions are, and hopefully that's what we're doing.
Okay, one thing about Star is they sort of buck trends. I mean, people on course will say that's not bookmaking. They're opening betting shops, and quite salubrious betting shops, when other people are closing them. You know, what is that part of the identity as well?
Yeah, of course it is. I mean, the betting shop side of things, look, you're not going to get hugely rich from having 19 shops, which is what we have, right? And it is hard to make betting shops work, but it's a part of the whole bigger picture. It's part of the presence, it's part of the service. If you go into Curzon Street or Harrow Road or Newell Lane or whatever shop it may be, Salford, Norris Green, we like to think that we offer the best service out there. It's always going to be very clean and tidy. They're all done out really nicely, but it's part of the whole package, whether it be the online side of things. You can call a bet up still, you can text the bet through still, you can bet with us on course, you can bet in a shop. It's just offering every single avenue that we can to bet, albeit it's not on a huge scale, because like I say, we've only got 19 shops, not 100. And just going back to the commercials of shops, what's difficult about the commercials of shops is a lot of the deals that you do in terms of whether it be fee providers or rights holders and stuff like that is done on the amount of shops that you have. So if you've got 100, 200, 300,000 shops, you get a much better deal. If you've only got 19, you're getting a worse deal, which makes it commercially even more difficult. So it's about trying to find that sweet spot of having the right amount of shops, but also not going too mass that you actually lose the identity of the brand.
Okay, and I was protesting to you before off camera that this should be a betting people interview, and you said it's not a cost cutting thing, it's because you're too young. Do you think the fact that you are alarmingly, well, relatively young for such a position that you've got, and so not having ingrained ideas, has helped you? Because bookmakers tend to be quite, this is how we've always done it, and it takes a lot of shifting. So do you think that's been an asset? Yeah,
it works both ways, right? Obviously you lack the experience of the industry, so that's an obvious negative, but also it means that you see it in a slightly different light. I think what's also helped me is that previously John Lewis did the management scheme there, has worked with tons of different teams, my first ever role was actually in women's shoes in John Lewis Watford. So you work with a wide range of people, and you learn to communicate with a wide range of people as well. So I think that stood me in good stead. And then when we get to the star side of things, working in the trading room, getting to know the business very well, it's obviously a smaller business at the time as to what it is now. Knowing the people, knowing how to communicate with them, knowing how to influence, and then moving up the ranks that way obviously presents its challenges, because you end up managing people that used to manage you. But the positive is that you never let it get to your head, and you want to work with these people, with the heads of departments, with their teams, and everybody's working towards the same common goal, and that's hopefully to win and make money, obviously, and to have a satisfying and fulfilling employment. So hopefully that answers that question. But just going back to the betting people piece, we've managed to do this in, I don't know, it's probably been about 8 or 9 minutes now, and we've not managed to pay Simon a fee, but I'm going to squeeze a few more questions out of you, Simon, so let's keep on walking. I think we can keep this going for another few minutes or so. And just to provide a bit more context, Simon actually broke down on the way here today, so he was meant to be writing 50 questions out, and he's doing this completely on the fly.
How many minutes have we done, Flynn?
I don't know, you tell me.
Okay, right, so the immediate aims of Star Sports. I mean, you're in there, you've been in there now for what, 12 months? Mm-hmm. You must have looked around and thought, this can change, that can change internally, but that's not what are the punters, what are the customers of Star Sports going to see a difference?
Well, we actually changed the colour of the website a couple of days ago, so that's gone to a slightly more dark and modern feel. We're trying to improve the product all the time. Like I say, because of regulation, you're having to go slightly more mass market, but then when you try to go slightly more mass market, it's obviously harder to cut through and takes a huge amount of spend. So it's trying to find that sweet spot of keeping the identity of which was previously the Gentleman's Bookmaker, and we've now gone to We Believe in Bookmaking, because that is what is in our roots at Star. So constantly improving the product, not trying to get too technical, but improve the customer journey, so the way that people come through to the site. Obviously that would improve retention, and obviously trying to acquire as many customers as possible. So hopefully over the next 12 months you'll see a better customer journey, so if you're joining our website, that journey will be more seamless, and hopefully you'll see a better product on there, and that's something that we've been improving for the last 6 years that we've been online, really. And there's obviously a lot of operators that are on the Playbook Engineering platform now as well, so you'll see a lot more operators popping up. But yeah, those are probably the key aims for the next kind of 6 to 9, 12 months, is just improve the customer journey as much as possible, continue to improve the product, and you'll still see us doing this on course, because this is where it all started, really, for Ben.
Okay, now I'm assuming that you've changed the colour because you've had people look into what the most attractive colour for punters is, all that sort of stuff. But being brutally honest, if you've got an account, we won't mention any names, but everybody will know what you're talking about. If you've got an account with a bookmaker that will quite often lay you 8, 7, 6 places, or a bookmaker that will price up the night before, and if you're an habitual loser, you can get what you like on within reason the night before, what is your unique selling point going to be to try and draw those customers away to you?
Well, service is the main one. So if you do bump into any issues with not being able to get a bet on with certain offers, with any issue that you have, then you can pick the phone up, you can speak to a trader, and we'll get it sorted for you straight away. There's no emailing back and forth for 2 months or anything like that. So that's the first selling point. Also the fact that when you do speak to a trader, they are very knowledgeable. Obviously worked in that room for quite a few years, and they're a really good group of guys and girls in there. So service is obviously the main one. The other one is obviously the appetite for risk, so we still like to lay a decent bet. Obviously we are a heavy regulated industry now, so that has its strings attached to it, but whether we're on course, whether we're in shops, whether we're working out of the office, then our appetite to lay a bet has not changed whatsoever. So if you are getting knocked back with other firms, then we'll give you as much as a go as anybody. So those would be the 2 key ones for me: the appetite to lay a bet still, and the personal service. Okay,
and the problem is the bone of contention for a lot of punters, it is not your fault and not the fault of most of the people in the industry, though there is the suspicion that some of the industry use the rules to their benefit. So the affordability checks that you have to do, or know your customer, and all, it's so how you, even though your hands are tied, what are you doing to try and make that as painless as possible? If you've got somebody that really wants to have a bet, but he really doesn't want to show you his bank account, I mean, what what are you sort of saying to people like that?
Well, the voluntary code's obviously coming from the BGC now, hasn't it? Which gives guidance around net deposit amounts, which is 5,000 a month, 15,000 over 90 days, or 25,000 over a 12-month period, right? So the voluntary code kind of gives clear guidance as to what those amounts are in terms of affordability, when you should be financially risk assessing customers and stuff like that.
Well, that gives most people are going to well fall below that bracket then, aren't they?
Well, yeah, exactly. Like huge portion will. Our percentage will be higher because people tend to find us because they're slightly bigger staking and they want that service which we can obviously offer. But look, speaking completely candidly, if people hit those markers, or certain markers, I think it's the 90 days and then the lifetime, and you have to financially risk assess somebody and they don't want to provide any information, then that will have to be it, unfortunately. But that is unfortunate. I say unfortunately, but that is the world we're in terms of the UK regulated market. So, but what the code does do is, like I say, the majority of people will fall under those 5,000, 15,000 and 25,000 brackets, obviously. So it gives some clear guidance for once, instead of having to use your own data to come up with your policies or doing competitor analysis. At least there's some figures to work to. The ambiguity comes in with the markers of harm piece, so we need to be looking out for signs of gambling harm before they hit those financial triggers. So we've got lots of dashboards now. We work with different software companies to flag these markers of harm, and then we've actually got a player safety team within compliance that interacts with these customers based off the back of these markers of harm, whether it be frequency of play, playing overnight, increase in amount of deposits and stuff like that. We do have to have those things in place to try and do the right thing and spot these marks of harm, but at least now we have the guide on affordability. That is a massive help. What is slightly more ambiguous is the guide on AML, because there's not a huge guide on AML.
What's AML?
Anti-money laundering, and when you should do those checks, because this source of funds would look very similar to proof of funds, so showing where the money's coming from, you're still going to be asking for financial information, right? So we don't have a huge amount of guidance, but we're hoping that we'll get that from the BGC or the UKGC pretty soon.
Okay, there's something that's been quite almost unbelievable and sort of funny to the extent is the fact that Andrew Black was asked for his financial details for the firm that he founded. Are you allowed any common sense? So can you say, if one of your traders said to you, who's this Andrew Black fella, can you Google him and say, oh my God, he's a multi-millionaire, we can take it as ready, can afford it, or this guy trains horses for the king, or this person owns 15 horses. Can't you do that to save them the embarrassment of actually asking them if they can afford it? Is that something that you're allowed to do?
You can take it into account, but you can't solely rely on open source, because you never really know what's going on behind the background. We've seen lots of high profile individuals fairly recently who would appear to be very, very wealthy, and then it turns out that they're not. So those checks would still have to happen. Look, you can use the open source information to back up the stuff that you get, obviously. But in terms of just using open source, we've always been told that you can't do that. And I do get it from an AML point of view, because you still don't know where the money's coming from, even though they appear to be very wealthy, if that makes sense.
Okay, now we're here at Ascot today. As everybody can see, we're probably only 25 minutes before the first race. Mm-hmm. This is not going to be busy today, especially if the rain I drove through at Bristol comes up. You've got two pitches. So Star Sports are, you're buying pitches. You bought Windsor, you've bought Fontwell, you're looking to buy other pitches. Is that a shop window, or is the on-course something that you're actually, I assume you're obviously trying to make money, but is it something is it more of a shop window or a big part of the business than a big part of the business?
It'd be nice if we were making money on course this year, which I can't say, but it's a bit of both, really. Look, there is more money around on course these days, but we're not buying really expensive pitches. Like, we've just bought 5 on the rails of Sandown for the flat, and we've also bought the same for the jumps. They were like 35 grand a piece. So the kind of strategy has been buy a slightly lower number, be as visible as you can be. So okay, you don't want to be number 15 on the rail, but we don't need to be number 1, because we're not as interested in taking as many bets as possible. It's more just about being in the vicinity, lowering the downside, because you're not spending as much in terms of an upfront cost. But a positive about pitches, and why I always find pitches more attractive in terms of commercial purchases than shops, is that with a pitch, you're buying an asset. Okay, you could argue that you have to pay a betting badge fee to stand in, which tends to be 5, 6, 7 times the admission fee, and there are some more attached payments to it, but it's all fairly small stuff. So if we bought a pitch here for 50 grand and we'd had it for 3 years and you've made 20 grand out of it, you could then go and sell that pitch. You might not get 50 grand for it, you might get 40, but you've made 10 grand on the pitch, right? Whereas if you buy a shop, you can win in the shop, but you might have a huge lease, you might have huge rent and rates, so as a horse goes by. So a bad shop can impact the whole estate commercially, whereas pitches, in terms of racecourse pitches, are much lower downside. So that's why we are buying more pitches, because they are low downside. It is where our roots are, coming to places like this. We obviously bought number 4 on the rails here very recent. Number 5 on the rails here very recently. We've had our pitching taps for a while, and we are on the lookout for more pitches because it is an identity piece, but also from a commercial point of view, they are fairly low downside.
And I also like to hazard a guess that you actually quite like it, don't you?
No, I do like it. I mean, look at the weather. And I'm here at Ascot rather than being in the office on a Friday. But also I think it's important for myself still to come a fair amount when I can, for Ben to come. Ben's put a right shift in recently. He went to Windsor the other day. He actually
Hang on, that wasn't the right shift. He'd done 2 races.
Well, no, but he did text me in the morning and said, should I go to Windsor tonight? And I was like, Ben, it's going to be raining all day. It will be utterly useless. And he texted me back half an hour and said, don't worry, I'm going. And then he stood there for 2 or 3 races. So I think it's important for us still to come, because we can do videos like this. It's so important as a bookmaker, especially within the saturated market we're in now, to have identity. I think you've seen that with AK Bets coming online, obviously onto the Playbook platform as well, has a clear identity and connects with his customers, and it's so important for myself and Ben to continue to do that for Star Sports, so we stay in the picture, so we've still got our niche, and hopefully our niche is the fact that you can connect with us. And like I said earlier, the personal service side of things, whether you visit one of the shops, whether you come to us on course, whether you call up one of the traders in the office, whether you speak to one of the customer service agents, compliance, whoever it may be, you'll get that service, and that's what we need to keep going.
Okay, and to keep the service going now, Flynn, you won't do much interaction down here, and we've got a first race to bet on, so I think you better get back up there and help Lofty and the gang out.